Chapter 1659. At this moment, his two black palms had already closed in on Chu Luiyue and were about to succeed. However, when they were a step away from Chu Luiyue, they suddenly stopped and were unable to take another step forward. It was as if there was something terrifying in front of them that made them fearful. The black shield stood silently in front of Chu Luiyue. At a glance, there was nothing special about it. However, the two black palms finally stopped and refused to move forward. The black-robed man seemed to have expected this as he gritted his teeth and said, "I actually forgot that you still have this trump card." His voice was cold and resentful. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and was still constructing the Xian formation in front of her as if she didn't hear it. Or maybe she heard it, but she didn't care. Since the battle at Myriad Wine Mountain, she knew that compared to Crimson Heaven Sword, this black shield was the true trump card of her trump cards. When she faced such a terrifying attack at that time, she relied on this black shield to survive, let alone now. This black-robed man was strong, but he wasn't so strong that he was invincible. Even if she couldn't defeat him, it wasn't that difficult for her to survive. Under the protection of the black shield, this battle that didn't have any suspense came to a halt. The scene seemed to be frozen, allowing time to flow slowly. Only the Xian formation in front of Chu Luiyue was expanding and becoming more and more complicated. Let's see how long you can hide. She could temporarily hide behind the black shield and buy some time for herself. However, she couldn't be like this forever. As for the Xian formation, he didn't think that Chu Luiyue had the ability to do so. Both parties were in a stalemate. Chu Ning's gaze swept across the few of them as he frowned. He roughly saw the current situation, but he still felt that there were many things that were very strange. Why did the black-robed man want to snatch Yu's pill of origin? Yu wanted to use the Xian formation to fight with the opponent, but he didn't know if it would work. Furthermore, the black-robed man didn't even look at them from the beginning to the end. He didn't make a move against Rongxiu, and Rongxiu also watched from the side and didn't make a move. What exactly was going on with them? Unable to figure it out, Chu Ning gave up. He clenched his fists and prayed in his heart. You must come back safe and sound." Nan Yuxing and the others finally slowed down after making sure that no one was chasing after them. There were 4 of them in total. Nan Yuxing and Elder Bai Tong were heavily injured, while Nan Yi was lightly injured. Only Elder Wu Peng's situation was slightly better. However, losing a King Divine artifact that he had personally refined was not a small blow to him. The few of them found a place to rest, and only then did they carefully treat their injuries. Nan Yuxing was still fine. They hadn't fought head-on. His anger had attacked his heart, causing his internal injuries to worsen. However, it was still within a manageable range. Elder Bai Tong's situation was the worst. A section of his calf was cut off. Even though he was a celestial physician, the only thing he could do now was to stop the bleeding and heal his wounds. That section of his calf had been completely crushed, and he didn't even have the chance to sew it back together. This would have a huge impact on any cultivator. They were all silent, and the atmosphere was cold and stifling. After a long while, Nan Yi finally couldn't help but ask, "That man, who is he? When did such a person appear in the god-slaying mound?" His strength was unbelievably strong, and he even said that it was his territory. At first, they thought that he was just saying it casually. However, what happened later made them suspicious. He doesn't look like he's from the outside world. However, in the battle tens of thousands of years ago, all the god-level experts were killed and their souls destroyed. Moreover, the energy here is violent. Ordinary people can't stay here for more than a year. Otherwise, it's very easy for them to die because they can't withstand the violent energy here. Nan Yuxing frowned and muttered to himself. Elder Wu Peng suddenly said, "He's not a normal person. He's just a soul. That's why he's so strong. Isn't that even more suspicious?" Nan Yuxing rubbed his forehead. Ordinary cultivators without a physical body would have their strength greatly reduced. However, that wasn't the case for that black-robed man. There's also that Rongxiu. I've heard some rumors about him before, but I didn't pay much attention to him. Now that I've seen him today, I know that his strength has reached such a level. At the mention of this, Nan Yuxing couldn't help but clench his teeth. Resentment, jealousy, unwillingness. He had always prided himself on being outstanding, but today he was dim in front of that man. How could he feel good? Elder Wu Peng said in a deep voice. This Rong Xiu is hiding his strength. When we go back, we must investigate him carefully. Also, Patriarch Rong Xiu recognized them immediately. It was obvious that he knew them well. He even called out Nan Yifun's name in such a casual tone. This was another hidden concern in Elder Wu Peng's heart. They were all silent for a moment. If Rong Xiu wasn't bluffing, then, look. Something seems wrong over there. Nan Yi looked back and suddenly exclaimed. They all looked over. The sky in the distance had unknowingly become gloomy. There seemed to be lightning flashing vaguely. They're fighting? Nan Yuxing suddenly realized something and sneered. No matter how powerful they are, they're definitely not that man's match. I'm afraid they're all going to die in that man's hands. Wind, clouds, and thunder. The energy of heaven and earth kept surging. Chu Liuyue's hair was lifted by the wind. The oppressive feeling around her seemed to have become stronger. Chu Liuyue frowned slightly. Although the black shield could help her block most of the attacks, it couldn't completely isolate all the power. The black-robed man's god domain was indeed too terrifying. If this continued, she was afraid that before she could cast the Xian formation, she would clatter. A stone suddenly fell out of Chu Liuyue's universe ring. The black-robed man was stunned when he saw this scene. Why did a stone suddenly appear? Clatter. Immediately after, the second stone fell. Then more and more stones appeared. Digression, I'm going out to do something today, so I might be late when I get home, so I won't let everyone wait. I'll update it tomorrow. Chapter 1660. Soon, the ground around Chu Liuyue was littered with stones. It was messy and did not seem to follow any rules. The black-robed man was even more confused. Why did so many stones suddenly appear out of nowhere? Could it be that Shangguan Yu needs the power of these stones to set up a Xian formation? But these ugly stones are ordinary. What's so good about them? However, for some reason, they look familiar. Splash. The faint sound of waves was suddenly heard. The sound was very soft. If one did not listen carefully, they would not be able to hear it clearly. However, the surroundings were very quiet at this moment, and the black-robed man's attention was focused on Chu Liuyue, so he happened to hear this sound. Just as he was puzzled, a blue stream of light suddenly surged out from one of the stones. The originally powerful pressure that was almost suffocating seemed to have been torn open by this blue stream of light. The black-robed man finally realized something. This is a god domain? There was a hint of disbelief in his voice. It was not only because of the god domain that suddenly flowed out of the stones, but also because he finally remembered why these stones looked so familiar. Aren't these the broken tombstones from the tomb of the exalted gods? Why did these things suddenly appear in Shangguan Yu? The black-robed man had a bad feeling. He vaguely felt that he seemed to have overlooked something important. While he was in shock and hesitating, more and more god domains surged out from the stones. These god domains were scattered, and almost every one of them was very small and weak. However, many little drops made an ocean. At this point, there were at least hundreds of stones scattered around Chu Liuyue. Together, there were hundreds of god domains. Most importantly, these god domains seemed to have some kind of tacit understanding with each other. With Chu Liuyue as the center, they surrounded her and surged silently, tearing holes in the invisible pressure. Silently, Chu Liuyue was already completely surrounded and protected by these god territories. The pressure around her suddenly decreased, causing Chu Liuyue to open her eyes in shock. When she saw the rocks and the divine territory around her, she was shocked. This was because she had been thinking about how to complete the Xian formation as soon as possible to defend against the black-robed man's attack. He didn't expect that these stones would come out of the interspatial ring by themselves. And he's even taking the initiative to protect me? Chu Liuyue blinked and thought for a moment. She didn't even have time to summon her divine realm before. Then, she lifted her gaze and looked at the black-robed man again. Even though she couldn't see his face, She could keenly sense that his aura had become even more ferocious and dangerous. Seeing this scene, his mood probably wouldn't be too good. Thinking of this, Chu Liyue's lips curved up. With this huge help, her chances of winning were even higher. You actually took all of these for yourself? The black-robed man suddenly raised his hand and pointed at Chu Liyue. Sheng Guanyu, how dare you? Because of his agitation, his voice became a little sharp, but he quickly suppressed it, as if he was worried about something. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Thank you for the compliment. You've known me for a long time. Do you only know who I am now? Actually, she didn't take these stones on her own accord, but they insisted on following her. She had no choice but to keep them in her interspatial ring. She didn't care much at first, but now, these stones seemed to be quite useful. The black-robed man was so angry that his hand that was pointing at Chu Liyue trembled slightly. You. However, after holding it in for a long time, he couldn't think of any rebuttal. Of course, he knew what these stones were, and that was why he was so shocked. Weren't they living well in my place? They had been living like this for tens of thousands of years. No matter how the weather changed, they remained indifferent and only maintained the same state. Why did they suddenly change when they met Sheng Guanyu? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he felt a little worried for the first time. Such a shocking change was definitely not a small matter. Moreover, with their help, it wouldn't be that easy to kill Sheng Guanyu again. He began to try to increase the pressure of his deity domain in an attempt to attack Chu Liyue again. However, hundreds of deity domains had already formed an extremely strong protective net around Chu Liyue. If he wanted to deal with Chu Liyue again, he would have to think of other ways. The black-robed man fell into a long silence as he looked at the countless deity domains floating in the air. Are those deity domains? Chu Ning frowned slightly and asked softly. Rong Xiu nodded slightly. We accidentally bumped into these yesterday. They seem to be fated with you. You couldn't resist and brought them along. I didn't expect them to be so useful at such a crucial time. Chu Ning didn't say anything. Rong Xiu looked around and saw that Chu Ning was still staring at the deity domains. He thought that Chu Ning was still worried about Chu Liyue, so he said, Don't worry. Don't worry. Although the individual might of these god territories isn't extremely strong, when gathered together, they can still unleash a great effect. Moreover, Ur has her own deity domain, so she has her own deity domain? Ur just happened to break through to the high god realm some time ago. Due to the special circumstances, Rong Xiu didn't explain in detail. Ur's deity domain didn't appear during this breakthrough. She already had it a few years ago. It was just that she suppressed her deity domain in Mount Pengmin during this period of time. So this is a deity domain. Chu Ning seemed to have understood something, and a look of realization appeared on his face. He lowered his eyes and looked at his hands. They were blood-stained and full of injuries. However, his eyes seemed to be looking at something else through his hands. Rong Xiu felt that something was strange when he noticed Chu Ning's silence. Lord Chu Ning, what's wrong? Chu Ning retracted his gaze and shook his head. Nothing. I just feel that has changed a lot after we parted. What was her cultivation level when we parted last time? Now, she had grown to her current level. Rong Xiu was about to speak when he heard Chu Ning's voice suddenly lower. She must have suffered a lot, right? He asked carefully, but there was an unconcealable sadness and heartache in his voice. Rong Xiu's words were suddenly stuck in his throat. He looked at Chu Ning with a slightly deep gaze. Everyone could see that she was shining brightly. Only those who truly loved her could see her hardships and difficulties. After a long while, Rong Xiu slowly tightened his hands in his sleeves and said, Don't worry. I'll make sure that she's safe and happy. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1661. The Xian formation in front of Chu Liyue was gradually being completed. A terrifying aura was being emitted from the formation. At the same time, dark clouds were gathering in the sky, and the wind and thunder were howling. The uneasiness in the black-robed man's heart grew stronger. When he made his move just now, he had caused a phenomenon in heaven and earth. However, when Chu Liyue's Xian formation was completed, he was shocked to realize that her ability to summon the energy of heaven and earth seemed to be slightly better than his. This made his already anxious heart feel even more uncomfortable. I can't let this go on. He had spent a lot of effort to lure Shangguanyu here. If he couldn't take her down today, it would be difficult for him to find such an opportunity in the future. Furthermore, this woman's strength had always been increasing at an unimaginable rate. In the beginning, he didn't take her seriously at all. However, as the days passed, she was now able to make him feel threatened. If he delayed any longer, perhaps one day, Shangguanyu would surpass him. Who knows? When that time came, wouldn't all his years of planning go to waste? When he thought of this, he finally made up his mind and raised his hand. He didn't have a physical body. Instead, he was a translucent soul in his black robe. At this moment, he stretched out his hands and a black fog appeared. The strange black fog lingered around his hands and then quietly dissipated. However, when his hands reappeared, they were different from before. They were thinner and even looked like skeletons. They carried an unconcealable evil aura. Swoosh! A dark light flashed past his palms. Suddenly, a black wooden stick appeared. The wooden stick was about the thickness of an adult's arm. It was dark in color and its surface was rough with many scratches. However, the top of the wooden stick was very round and seemed to be engraved with red veins. However, the color was extremely dim and didn't stand out when compared to the black color. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice it. However, the black wooden stick had a very good texture and seemed to be quite heavy. The black-robed man slowly clenched his fists. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings suddenly surged towards him. Then all of it poured into the wooden stick. In an instant, smoke and dust filled the air. Noticing the commotion, Chu Liyue quickly looked up to take a look. Her gaze lingered on the black wooden stick for a moment. With just one glance, her heart suddenly trembled. This thing, I'm afraid, is not simple. She held her breath and concentrated, speeding up the drawing of the profound formation in front of her. A strange blood-red rune suddenly appeared on the black wooden stick. The appearance of this rune seemed to have opened a layer of restriction, causing the black wooden stick's aura to rise once more. The first layer of the brilliant heaven staff, Wave Breaker. He gripped the black wooden stick tightly with both hands, raised it high, and then slammed it down hard. Boom! The black wooden stick landed heavily on the ground, exploding with an earth-shattering boom. Crack! A gully instantly appeared on the ground. A tyrannical and violent power swept out. The ravine also began to extend towards Chu Liyue at an astonishing speed. Everywhere it passed, space was unable to endure this sudden and terrifying force, and it collapsed soundlessly. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Liyue. Crash! The energy of heaven and earth around Chu Liyue was greatly affected by this attack, and it began to spread wildly to the side. The countless divine domains around her were also gradually surging up and down like waves. The black-robed man stared at the scene in front of him. The brilliant sky staff was his trump card, and it was extremely powerful. However, every time he used it, he would expend a lot of energy, and it would take him at least 3 months to recover. Therefore, he rarely used it. Originally, he did not want to use it today. After all, it was not difficult for him to deal with Shangguanyu. However, he did not expect her to have so many trump cards. Furthermore, she had even taken those stones that contained divine domains for her own use. Helpless, he could only do this. As long as he could end the battle quickly, everything else could be temporarily put aside. The brilliant sky staff had a total of 3 layers of power. Each layer was stronger than the previous one, but the impact on him was also greater. However, even the first layer was enough to deal with her. Crash! The sound of the surging waves became clearer and clearer in his ears. Chu Liyue could even see that the divine domains around her were also greatly affected, and they were on the verge of collapse. It was as if they would be destroyed by that terrifying power at any time. The surrounding environment was unstable, and she could not continue to focus on the Xian formation. But she was so close. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Then she suddenly thought of something and had a thought. Whoosh, countless stones rolled out from the universe ring, and in a short while, they covered her body. Several divine realms rushed out of these stones and merged with the previous ones. Very soon, the divine realm that was still on the verge of collapse became stable again. As for that energy, it was finally completely blocked outside and was unable to move forward in the slightest. How is this possible? The black-robed man was shocked by the scene in front of him. Just now, he had made up his mind to finish off Shangguanyu, and he did not hold back at all. How is she so strong? No, that's not right. To be more precise, she had too many stones on her. Did she empty the tombs of the exalted gods? Chu Liuyue's lips curled into a smile. Looks like this move of yours is only wave breaking. If it was a huge wave, it would not be so easy for him to break it. Boom. The two forces collided fiercely, but Chu Liuyue's divine domain did not fluctuate at all. On the contrary, the black-robed man's strike was quickly collapsing. Looking at the scene before him, the black-robed man was first shocked, then he trembled with anger. She actually withstood that strike. She did not even make a move from the beginning to the end. She only threw some stones. Are you crazy? In a moment of desperation, the black-robed man could no longer hold back and shouted at the stones. How dare you help her like this? Have you all forgotten who you are? This shout was obviously directed at the rocks. Although the scene looked very strange, Chu Liyue, who had dealt with these stones before, knew that they could understand human language. However, no matter how angry he was, no matter how loud he screamed, the rocks remained indifferent. There was no reaction at all. The black-robed man was furious. Are you all trying to rebel? No matter what, these stones came from the tombs of the exalted gods. However, this was the tombs of the exalted gods. And he was indeed an exalted god powerhouse. Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. Looks like they don't want to bother with you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1662. I can't let this go on, the black-robed man thought to himself. He had already sensed that the Xian formation in Shangguanyu was not simple. With the help of these stones, I'm afraid, he no longer hesitated and made a prompt decision. He held the brilliant sky staff tightly. The energy in the surroundings surged again. This time, the commotion was obviously bigger than the previous one. Then, a second strange rune appeared on the black wooden staff. The blood-red totem at the top of the wooden staff also became clearer. Second stage of the brilliant sky staff, Mountain Seal. The black-robed man's sleeves fluttered, and the aura around him surged wildly. The second strike landed fiercely. Boom! A ray of black light suddenly flew out from the wooden staff and rapidly transformed into numerous black vines that were as thick as a thumb. These vines intertwined with each other, and in the blink of an eye, they formed a huge dome that trapped Chu Liyue within. Chu Liyue's surrounding god domain was once again shaken by this force and started shaking. She felt a tightness in her chest, and a strong smell of blood spread from her mouth. She forced herself to swallow it and continued to draw the last few strokes on the Xian formation. The god territory's energy fluctuated more violently, and it seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The black-robed man sneered. With the help of these god territories, Shangguanyu was indeed difficult to deal with. However, whether it was her or these god territories, they were only high gods. If they wanted to defeat him, it was still too early. Die! The black-robed man shouted. Countless vines instantly tightened. Some of the god territories around Chu Liyue were unable to withstand the erosion of this force and began to shatter. However, at this moment, a reddish-gold ray of light suddenly flashed. Then, a little girl who looked no older than 3 or 4 years old appeared in front of Chu Liyue. She was wearing a reddish-gold lotus leaf dress, and her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string and a golden bell. She looked very cute, especially her pair of black grape-like eyes, which were clear and pure. However, at this moment, his eyes were burning with raging flames of fury. She pointed at the black-robed man, and her face was filled with anger. You want to bully, are you? You're courting death. The sudden appearance of Dumpling caused the atmosphere to become strange. The black-robed man looked at the little girl who suddenly appeared and almost laughed out loud. What's the matter? Shangguan, you can't beat him, so you even called out your children to fight? Isn't that a little too? Suddenly his laughter stopped. The space around Chu Luiyue had already been sealed by his brilliant sky rod. The people outside could not enter, and the people inside could not come out. How did this little girl suddenly appear there? Furthermore, when she appeared, there didn't seem to be any energy fluctuations around her. How could such a child do all this? He stared at Dumpling and was suddenly startled. Wait a minute. When she appeared, there seemed to be a flash of golden light. Could it be Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? He almost couldn't believe his eyes as he shouted out these words. He knew that Shangguan had a contracted divine beast called the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. When he suddenly saw this little girl, he didn't think of that. However, everything in front of him kept proving his guess. Before he could react, Dumpling had already moved and went directly to the surrounding intertwined black vines. With a wave of her small hand, the golden flame flew out instantly. It landed on the black vines and began to burn violently. The black-robed man's heart sank. It was indeed the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. However, if the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix wanted to transform into a human, it should at least look like a teenager. However, this little girl looked to be only 3 or 4 years old. How did she do it? Moreover, why hadn't he heard of this before? Countless questions flashed through his mind, but he didn't have much time now. Under the burning of the reddish-gold flames, the layer of black vines was gradually burned to nothing. Moreover, the fire seemed to be spreading. How is this possible? The black-robed man was shocked when he saw this scene. The brilliant sky rod was his trump card and was extremely powerful. Ordinary flames couldn't do anything to it. Even the flames of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix could barely resist it. How could there be such a one-sided situation? However, he didn't know that Dumpling's flames were different from ordinary Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenixes. She had the purest bloodline and inherited the power of the ancestor of the clan. Back then, that ancestor was born in the chaos and was a supreme existence in the world. How could it be a problem to deal with him? While he was in a daze, Dumpling had already dashed to the front of those black vines. Her little face was filled with anger. She actually reached out her chubby little hand and grabbed at the black vines. Arrogant! When the black-robed man saw this, he was so angry that he laughed mockingly. This Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix was indeed quite capable, but unfortunately, she was too impulsive and brainless. The black vines were covered with sharp thorns. Even if a high god powerhouse tried to grab it forcefully, he would only end up being stabbed. Needless to say, there was poison on it. What? His smug smile froze on his face before it could fully spread out. Tuanzi directly grabbed the rattan in front of her and pulled it hard. The huge vines were pulled down by her just like that. This time, even the entire cage made of black rattan vines began to tremble, on the verge of collapsing. At the same time, the flames in Dumpling's palm surged and burned the cage to ashes. She didn't even give the black-robed man any time to react. By the time he realized what was happening, the entire semicircular cage made of black vines had been destroyed by Dumpling. On the other hand, there wasn't even a scratch on Dumpling's chubby little hand. Dumpling kept pulling, venting all her anger on the black vines. The originally sturdy cage was torn apart by her just like that. Ignoring the gazes of others, Dumpling gritted her teeth and quickly pulled the black vines together. Then she waved a ball of fire. Boom! The fire soared into the sky and burned completely. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1663. There was dead silence. The crackling sound of the burning vines was exceptionally clear. The black-robed man took a step back weakly. He held the brilliant sky rod in one hand and placed his other hand on his chest. He bent down slightly, as if he was experiencing some kind of pain. He had used almost all of his strength to execute this attack. Now that they were burned by Tuanzi in such a way, the countercharge he suffered was extremely shocking. How could he bear it? After this incident, he would definitely not be able to recover without half a year of recuperation. He gritted his teeth and his voice seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. He did not hide his deep resentment and anger. What a good Shangguan you! I really underestimated you. He thought that by inviting her here he would be able to use all of his strength to deal with her easily. But he never expected Shangguan Yu to be such an iron plate. Not only did her strength increase since the last time they met, she even had more trump cards. This kind of luck was really heaven-defying. If this dragged on, it was really hard to tell who would win or lose. Chu Luiwei ignored him and only stared at the Xian formation in front of her. Dumpling stood in front of her and placed her hands on her waist. You've schemed against our Ayu several times, right? This time, you even used Grandpa Chu as a hostage to force Ayu to come here. What venerable god expert, I think you're just a despicable and shameless coward. You've done so many things, but you don't even dare to show your true face. Oh, right, I almost forgot, you don't even have a face. You want to bully our Ayu? Have you asked for my permission? Dumpling's mouth was like a cannon as she continuously scolded the black-robed man. The black-robed man felt his blood boiling when he heard these words. He wanted to kill her immediately and shut her up forever. What about you? You can't even defeat me, and you want to deal with Ayu? You don't even know if you're worthy. You're not convinced? Come on. The black-robed man was so angry that he couldn't say a word. He had lived for so long, but he had never been scolded by a little girl who was still wet behind the ears like this. Chu Ning was dumbfounded. This little girl is? Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly. This is Yu Er's contracted magical beast, the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, which is the one that used to follow by her side. You can call her Dumpling. The previous one didn't look like this. Moreover, how did this contracted magical beast become so powerful? Chu Ning felt that everything she had experienced today was too surreal. Even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he still found it unbelievable. He had just seen how powerful that black-robed man was. However, this Dumpling had actually countered his attack so easily. Moreover, Dumpling didn't look very old, but she had a glib tongue. This Dumpling is extremely smart and powerful. Chu Ning thought for a long time and could only use this euphemism to express it. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. She was brought out by Yu Er, so she's naturally different. The black-robed man was already in a state of madness. He had attacked twice in a row, but he didn't even touch Shangguan Yu's body. If this were to spread out, who knew how many people would laugh their heads off? Since you're so arrogant, take my third attack. He suddenly let go of the brilliant sky staff and crossed his hands in front of him. The third level of the brilliant sky staff, Return to Heaven. On the black wooden staff, the third rune slowly appeared. Digression. After running around the whole day yesterday, when I was writing at night, I fell asleep again. When I woke up, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. I could only write so much at noon and wait until I get home at night. Because I still have to make up for it, it will be around 9 o'clock. Love mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1664. The sky suddenly darkened. More and more dark clouds gathered, piling up together gloomily. No light could be seen. It was clearly noon, but at this moment, darkness had descended like dusk. Everything in the surroundings was shrouded in a thick layer of shadow. The wind stopped blowing. The wilderness became more and more silent. However, such silence made people feel inexplicably uneasy. The black-robed man suddenly held the brilliant heaven rod with both hands and pointed it to the sky. Go! This voice was distant and boundless, and it reverberated majestically between heaven and earth. Suddenly, the third rune on the brilliant heaven rod suddenly erupted with a blood-colored light beam. It soared to the sky. Swoosh! The void shook. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth was affected, and it also began to shake crazily. The blood-colored light beam shot straight to the sky, and it directly tore a hole in the thick and heavy cloud layer. It was like a stone falling into a calm lake, instantly creating ripples. Above the sky, dark clouds surged, layer upon layer. A blood-colored hole appeared in the black cloud layer. With this as the center, the blood-colored light on the brilliant heaven rod also spread silently to the surroundings. Soon, half of the sky was actually dyed with a layer of shocking blood color. Black and red, these two extreme colors intertwined with each other. Dense killing intent gradually spread, and it crushed towards the ground, almost suffocating people. At this moment, time seemed to pass exceptionally slowly. The blood-colored light beam gushed out from the brilliant heaven rod, and it connected with the sky. Between the dark heaven and earth, this blood-colored light was exceptionally conspicuous. The power above was constantly surging, causing the blood-colored light in the sky to gradually spread out, and the range became wider and wider. Unknowingly, it had already covered a large area of the sky. Chu Luiwei and the rest were quietly included in the range of this blood-colored light. Rong Xiu raised his head and looked, and his deep phoenix eyes narrowed dangerously. It seemed that this time he really intended to take that thing away from you or at all costs. To use this move, he was practically risking his life. There seemed to be waves surging in his eyes, and a thick black gold color flashed past. He gently closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they had already regained their calmness. Chu Ning stood beside Rong Xiu, her heart in her throat. He clenched his fists tightly and did not even feel his wounds open. His eyes were fixed on Chu Luiwei, who was not far away. You must be safe. This time, the commotion was huge and everyone within 100 miles could see it clearly. Nan Yuxing and his group were no exception. They had been paying close attention to the situation over there, and when they saw the blood-red pillar of light soaring into the sky, they couldn't hide their excitement. What's that? Nan Yi frowned, her face filled with curiosity and nervousness. Even from such a distance, she could still sense the terrifying pressure and baleful aura from the blood-red pillar of light. She placed one hand over her heart. The full-powered attack of a venerable god is indeed not to be underestimated. It seems that the black-robed man has made his move. Nan Yuxing narrowed his eyes, his heart filled with lingering fear and delight. The lingering fear was that the black-robed man was indeed very strong. Even if they were not injured, they might not be his match if they joined forces. The delight was that the first to bear the brunt of the attack was undoubtedly Rong Xiu and his group. He has already made up his mind to take their lives, so of course he won't show mercy. Elder Wu Peng's voice was low, and his brows were slightly furrowed as if he was thinking about something. But what? Nan Yuxing asked subconsciously. Elder Wu Peng paused. But until now, I still haven't figured it out. He said that place is his territory. What does this mean? Nan Yuxing was stunned for a moment. This sentence, isn't it the literal meaning? Could it be that there are other meanings? Elder Wu Peng fell into silence. Nan Yuxing and his group were still young and did not know much about the god-slaying tomb, but he had heard many rumors about it. Since the shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago, countless god-level experts had fallen in the god-slaying tomb. After a long time, the place was filled with a dense killing intent that had never dissipated. Even a powerful cultivator would have to be extremely careful when entering this place. But he had never heard of anyone who dared to say that the god-slaying tomb was his territory. Even if it was only a small area. One must know that the tomb was full of former top experts. Especially the place where they were just now, which was the tomb of a god-level expert. Just by stepping on it, they might be able to step on the corpse of a god-level expert. And that black-robed man, it seemed that he was not lying. I feel that the aura of that person is somewhat familiar. Elder Bai Tong, who had been silent for a long time, finally recovered some strength and spoke. Everyone turned to look at him. Elder Wu Peng frowned. Familiar? You recognized his identity? Elder Bai Tong shook his head. Because of his broken leg, he could only support himself with a crutch. His face was pale and there was no color on his lips. He looked very haggard. Even his voice had become much weaker. He paused and glanced at Elder Wu Peng with a complicated expression. Don't you feel that the aura of that man is somewhat similar to the people of the Black Demon Cave? Black Demon Cave? Elder Wu Peng and the others were stunned. Didn't they go into seclusion a few years ago? Nan Yuxing frowned. The Nan family had no contact with the Black Demon Cave, not to mention after the Black Demon Cave went into seclusion. If Elder Bai Tong had not suddenly mentioned it, Nan Yuxing would not have remembered this name. They have always been arrogant and unbridled, and I heard that everyone in the sect is vicious and merciless. Although I haven't heard much about them in the past few years, those people from the Black Demon Cave are not easy to deal with. Elder Wu Peng was very experienced and had seen many storms. Although he had never confronted the Black Demon Cave head-on, he had heard many rumors about them in the past few years. He did not know what had triggered them in the past few years, but they had suddenly disappeared from the Divine Ruins world. That's not important now. What's important is that man does seem to be from the Black Demon Cave. Elder Wu Peng fell into deep thought. Then why would he appear here? No matter what his identity is, it's fine as long as he can take care of those people. Nan Yuxing waved his hand and said impatiently. They had suffered at the hands of Rong Xiu and Nan Yi, so they naturally wanted to get back at them. Although it was a pity that he could not do it himself, it was also good to be able to take care of them directly. Nan Yi pursed her lips when she heard this, as if she wanted to say something. Nan Yuxing's gaze turned slightly. How could he not guess what she was thinking when he saw her expression? His expression became colder and colder. Yi, are you still thinking about that Rong Xiu? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1665. Nan Yi came back to her senses and her body trembled slightly. She suddenly looked up at him. Being scrutinized by those stern eyes, she subconsciously looked away. How can that be? They injured us to such an extent, how can I still be thinking about this? Big brother, although I'm usually stubborn and mischievous, I'm not someone who doesn't know what's good for me. Nan Yuxing stared at her for a long time. His gaze was as sharp as a blade, as if he wanted to cut her open and see everything. He only retracted his oppressive gaze when Nan Yi almost couldn't take it anymore. It's good that you know. He is now the enemy of our Nan family. If you still have any thoughts about him? Nan Yi clenched her hands tightly. I won't. Only then did Nan Yuxing relax. That's good. After today, they probably won't be able to walk out of the god-slaying tomb alive. What's the point of thinking about that? The most important thing now is to help you find that thing as soon as possible. At the mention of this, their expressions changed slightly. Ever since they came to the god-slaying tomb, too many things had happened, so much so that they almost forgot this most important task. Eldest young master is right. No matter what's going on over there, it has nothing to do with us. It's just death. Finding that thing as soon as possible is the most important thing. Elder Wu Peng took out a palm-sized bronze octagonal compass as he spoke. On top of it, a transparent needle was vibrating slightly. Wu Peng, are we going to use the star catcher compass now? Elder Bai Tong was taken aback and hesitated. This thing was extremely precious and could quickly determine the location of that thing. However, every time the star catcher compass was used, it would cost the holder 3 months of his lifespan. Before they came, they had said that they would try their best not to use it. But now, Elder Wu Peng took it out just like that. Elder Wu Peng shook his head. The god-slaying tomb is extremely dangerous and full of variables. From the looks of it, we'd better end the battle quickly and find that thing to leave this place as soon as possible. All 4 of them were injured, and 2 of them were seriously injured and almost couldn't fight anymore. If they didn't use it now, when would they use it? This place is very strange and dangerous. If we continue to stay here, we don't know what kind of trouble we will encounter. Nan Yi's eyes lit up when she heard that she could leave. Can we go now? This is great. She didn't want to come to the god-slaying mound from the beginning, but her father insisted that she come. He even asked her brother and 2 elders to accompany her. Unable to dissuade him, she could only agree. He originally thought that he was just going through the motions, But who knew that it was actually so dangerous? What she had suffered in the past 2 days was more than what she had suffered in the past 10 years. Now that she could finally leave as soon as possible, of course she was happy. Elder Wu Peng reminded him. "Second miss, we still have to find that thing before we can leave." Nan Yi hurriedly nodded. "I know. However, as long as he used the star catcher plate, wouldn't he be able to find it very quickly?" From the looks of it, Elder Wu Peng did not seem to realize that doing so would deplete Elder Wu Peng's lifespan. Of course, it was also possible that he didn't care at all. Nan Yuxing's brows twitched. He didn't say anything, but his expression showed that he agreed with Nanny. They really didn't want to stay here any longer. Elder Bai Tong opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end he remained silent and only nodded. Elder Wu Peng closed his eyes. A lustrous glow slowly surged out from the star catcher plate and finally entered the transparent needle. In an instant, the needle seemed to have come to life. It became even more lustrous and transparent, and faintly trembled. Then the needle finally began to spin. In just a moment, the needle stopped and pointed straight in a certain direction. So fast? Elder Wu Peng opened his eyes in shock. Although the star catcher plate could sense the existence of that thing, it was actually not that accurate. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 10 minutes to completely confirm the direction. But this time, it was actually so fast? It seems that that thing is nearby. Elder Wu Peng had always been expressionless, but at this time, he was actually faintly excited. He had used the star catcher plate to determine the direction 3 times before, and each time, it would consume a lot of energy. But this time, he felt that the star catcher plate had given him the answer as soon as he made a move. This could only prove that the thing they were looking for was not far away from them. Elder Wu Peng took a deep breath, suppressed the excitement in his heart, and looked in the direction of the needle on the star catcher plate. However, what he saw caused him to be stunned on the spot. Because the transparent needle was pointing in the direction they had just escaped. Could it be that that thing was over there? Elder Wu Peng's expression changed, and the expressions of the people beside him were even more interesting. They all knew very well what this result meant. How is this possible? Nan Yuxing subconsciously wanted to refute. There must be something wrong with the star catcher plate. Elder Wu Peng, test it again. Elder Bai Tong frowned. Eldest young master, the star catcher plate has never been wrong, and it can't be tested a second time within a month. Besides, every time it is used, Wu Peng will lose a certain amount of his lifespan. The few of them fell silent. After a moment, Nan Yi couldn't help but ask. Then, doesn't this mean that we have to turn back? They had just escaped death over there. Moreover, anyone could see that the situation over there was dire straits. It was the most dangerous time. Wouldn't they be courting death if they went over now? Elder Wu Peng took a deep breath, put away the star catcher plate, and took the lead to walk forward. Digression will continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1666. Even if it was dangerous, since that thing was there, they still had to go over. Elder Wu Peng, Nan Yuxing called out hesitantly. It's the most dangerous time over there now. Why don't we go over later? Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks and turned back to look at him expressionlessly. Young master, we're not the only ones looking for that thing. If we're late and miss the opportunity, we'll have come here for nothing. Don't worry, with Bai Tong and I around, we'll definitely ensure the safety of you and Second Mississippi. I didn't. That was what he meant. Nan Yuxing took back his words halfway. He felt a little guilty when he heard this. Who were Elder Wu Peng and the others? How could they not see through his thoughts? Nan Yuxing felt a little embarrassed. In fact, he was usually very brave and had never been afraid of anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to accompany Nan Yi to the god-slaying tomb. But he didn't expect this place to be more dangerous than he had imagined. He had suffered a lot of accidents and torture in the past 2 days. Every time he thought about it, he felt that his body hurt even more. Seeing Elder Wu Peng's firm attitude and that it was to find that thing, this reason was really irrefutable. Nan Xing hesitated for a while before he gritted his teeth and agreed. You're right. In this situation, we'd better find that thing and leave as soon as possible. Although Nan Yi was very scared, she couldn't refuse since everyone had said that they would go. Besides, it was her job to look for that thing. She followed as if to persuade Nan Xing, but also as if to comfort herself. Actually, I think that the battle over there might be over by the time we get there. Anyway, that black-robed man's target isn't us. After he's done, he probably won't deliberately find trouble with us. Elder Wu Peng looked ahead with a frown and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. If that was the case, it couldn't be better. But that man said that it was his territory. If the thing was really there, then it wouldn't be so easy for them to take it away. Half of the sky had already been dyed the color of blood. An invisible pressure and murderous aura surged wildly between heaven and earth, almost making it difficult to breathe. Rong Xiu waved his sleeve and set up a barrier around Chuning. Tuanzi raised her head and took a look. What the hell is this? That cold and gloomy aura really made her uncomfortable. She waved her small hand, and a scarlet gold flame whip instantly lashed out. But the sound of something breaking through the air resounded. In the blink of an eye, the flaming whip had already arrived in front of the blood-colored pillar of light. However, as soon as the fire whip wrapped around it, a strange sizzling sound was heard. At the same time, a black mist drifted out. Accompanying it was an unbearable stench. The flame whip began to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a short while, the golden red whip broke in the middle. Furthermore, the parts that were wrapped around it were completely corroded. Dumpling was shocked and her eyes widened. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Ever since she opened her fourth meridian and inherited her ancestors' power, she had been successful in every endeavor. This was the first time she had suffered a loss. From this, it could be seen that the other party's strength was much stronger than before. The black-robed man suddenly sneered. Since you're so arrogant, try out the power of the third level first. As soon as he said that, the clouds in the sky suddenly moved. A thick blood-red color quickly condensed and transformed into an icicle that pierced downwards. The sharp sound of something breaking through the air caused one's scalp to tingle. It headed straight for Dumpling. Dumpling raised her head. The icicle was very long and about the height of a person. It was blood-red with a blunt top and sharp bottom, and had a cold luster. It descended from the sky at an increasing speed. Before it even arrived, she could already sense that extremely dangerous aura. A strong wind blew, and the golden bell on her head jingled as her skirt fluttered. From afar, it looked like a scarlet gold flame burning fiercely. She snorted softly, and with a tap of her toes, her small figure flew up instantly. He had chosen to face the attack head-on. In the blink of an eye, the two forces collided fiercely. Dumpling's fist was instantly cut by that sharp spike. An intense pain came instantly. Dumpling's brows furrowed. Ever since she transformed into her human form, she had never suffered a flesh wound. She snorted coldly, and her fist was suddenly covered with a layer of scarlet gold flame. That flame surged out in clusters, overlapping with each other. At a glance, it looked like layers of complicated feathers. The blood-red icicle finally stopped. Blood flowed continuously from Dumpling's hand, but that icicle was unable to move any further. Both parties were in a stalemate. At this moment, the scene seemed to have stopped. But in reality, both parties were still crazily killing each other. Dumpling's arms started to tremble slightly. She clenched her teeth and stimulated all the energy in her body. If they wanted to touch Ayu, they had to pass through her first. However, as time passed slowly, the power of the icicle did not decrease, but increased instead. Overestimating yourself. The black-robed man sneered disdainfully. How could the third level of the brilliant sky rod be so easily dealt with? As long as the brilliant sky rod was still there, this blood-red light pillar could continuously devour the surrounding energy of heaven and earth, turn it into its own use, and pour it into the icicle. In other words, on the surface, this crimson gold sky phoenix was fighting with an icicle, but in reality, It was fighting against the brilliant sky rod that had erupted with all its strength. If the clan leader of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was here, he might be able to put up a fight. But this little thing was simply not enough. Break! The black-robed man suddenly burst out with a cold shout. The blood-red color in the sky swayed even more and continued to pour energy into the icicle. That icicle had already pierced Dumpling's palm. In an instant, blood began to gush out at an even more shocking speed. Half of Dumpling's arm was stained with blood. Her round and adorable little face was also gradually turning pale at this moment. Needless to say, her little body was trembling even more violently. No, Ayu was below. Once she failed, Ayu would definitely be in danger. Dumpling gritted her teeth. The flames on her body had completely burned, almost covering her entire body. However, her body finally took half a step back uncontrollably. At the same time, her entire hand was almost pierced through by the icicle. The black-robed man raised his hand and then suddenly pressed down. That icicle seemed to be urged by this force and continued to pierce downwards. At this moment, an extremely cold voice suddenly rang out. I think, damn it, it's you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1667. The black-robed man was shocked and turned his head to look, only to see that Chu Liwei had already finished outlining the profound formation in front of her at some point in time. A vast and mighty pressure slowly spread out from above. This aura caused his heart to unconsciously tremble. Grand Mystic Emperor Division? He almost blurted out in disbelief. When did she break through to this level? He actually didn't know at all? Moreover, how old was she now? How could she break through to the Grand Mystic Emperor Division so easily? Chu Liwei looked up slightly, her eyes clear and cold. Soon after, her somewhat pale lips slightly curled up, revealing a smile of unknown meaning. Even if she couldn't see the black-robed man's face, it wasn't hard for her to imagine his shock and astonishment, as well as a trace of unconcealable panic. You're very surprised? Chu Liwei asked softly. Actually, it's quite a coincidence. I just happened to break through right before you came, and right here. What, isn't this your territory? You don't even know this? Chu Liue's words were like a sudden clap of thunder that suddenly exploded beside the black-robed man's ears. It caused his mind to tremble. How is that possible? If that was really the case, he would definitely know at the first moment. How could it be that only now? Suddenly, his voice paused as if he thought of something. Could it be? Not knowing if it was an illusion or not, Chu Liwei actually heard a trace of panic from his tone. Panic? This person was arrogant, unbridled, and practically didn't put anyone in his eyes. From the moment they arrived, he put on an appearance that said he wasn't to be trifled with. Why was he suddenly panicking out of nowhere now? Did her words remind him of something? Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes, but couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. She raised her eyes to look at Dumpling, who was currently confronting that icicle. When she saw Dumpling's bloody little hand, the last trace of a smile on her face quickly faded, and what replaced it was an undisguised strong killing intent. Minor Sky Shuttle Formation. Go! With a clear shout, Chu Liwei pushed the profound formation in front of her forward. The huge silver profound formation slowly floated up. The surrounding god realms seemed to have sensed something and nimbly avoided it one after another. Soon, the huge silver Xian formation was suspended in midair. It passed Dumpling's body, then floated to the top of Dumpling's head on to directly meet that icicle. With the help of this Xian formation, Tuanzi immediately felt relieved. At the same time, several streams of light lingered above the profound formation, binding the icicles. Then, it suddenly tightened. The crisp sound of something shattering could be heard. The icicle! Tuanzi was finally able to break free and fell down. Chu Liwei quickly went forward and hugged Tuanzi. Feeling, Dumpling God, Chu Liao of the God, of Chu, of God, of Chu Liwei patted her back with heartache. Dumpling, it's been hard on you. She took a look at Dumpling's hand. Her chubby little hand was almost pierced through. Her flesh was twisted and blood was dripping. She took a deep breath. A chill swept through her lungs, but it also felt like there was a ball of fire burning inside. It hurts a lot, right? Her voice was even softer, but her hands were even more nimble. She quickly took out an elixir and fed it to Dumpling. Dumpling nestled in her arms obediently and shook her head. It doesn't hurt. It's good that Ayu is fine. Chu Luiwei put her down carefully. Then, she took out medicine and gauze and carefully bandaged her wounds. Dumpling was afraid that she would be worried. She retracted her hands slightly and said in a crisp voice, Ayu, I'm fine. These are all superficial wounds. They will heal very quickly. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast. Her recovery ability was indeed extraordinary. But at this moment, her wound was truly a ghastly sight. Chu Liyue's eyes drooped slightly. Her hands were even gentler. Ever since Dumpling transformed into a human, she felt more and more sorry for her. Now that she was injured, and it was caused by protecting her, how could she not care? Moreover, the icicles were very eerie and strange. She didn't know if there was something dirty in them. She had to personally make sure that they were dealt with properly. Chu Luiwei didn't say anything. Dumpling frowned. Ayu, I'm really fine. Chu Luiwei finally stopped and looked up at Dumpling. I said that I would take good care of you in the future. I would never let you suffer. I will definitely do what I say. Dumpling's eyes reddened and her mouth flattened. Chu Luiwei took her hand. Now, does it still hurt? Dumpling nodded sadly. It hurts. Chu Luiwei hugged her again. If it hurts, I'll take revenge for you. She raised her head slightly and looked at the silver Xian formation. At this moment, it was suspended in the air and slowly rotating. It silently crushed the icicles and blocked all the threats on it. What was even more shocking was that the Xian formation was also crazily devouring the surrounding energy of heaven and earth and growing stronger. As the aura on it grew stronger, the Xian formation also started to expand. It was getting closer and closer to the blood-colored light pillar. This was taking the initiative to attack. The black-robed man was completely stunned. He felt that before he could react, Chu Liyue's Xian formation had already started to attack. The most shocking thing was that it seemed to really have the power to contend with the brilliant sky rod. Even a great Xian King Master might not be able to do this, right? Moreover, she had just broken through. He suddenly raised his head and stared at the slowly rotating silver Xian formation that was still expanding. He didn't recognize the Xian formation. He only vaguely remembered that Chu Luiwei had mentioned it before. Seemed to be some minor sky shuttle formation? Chu Liyue's lips curled into a cold smile. Ordinary Xian formations naturally couldn't contend with a venerable god expert. However, this minor sky shuttle formation was different. Because it was a new Xian formation created by Chu Luiwei after simplifying the sky shuttle formation. Although its overall power wasn't as strong as the real sky shuttle formation, Chu Luiwei had learned quite a bit of its essence. Therefore, the power it could unleash was absolutely outstanding. The reason why Chu Luiwei could unleash the Xian formation that was obviously stronger than her current strength was largely thanks to Debao. If he hadn't asked her to memorize those Xian formations by heart, if he hadn't helped her try to repair the sky shuttle formation, she definitely wouldn't have been able to do all these. This minor sky shuttle formation had almost exhausted all her strength. Victory or defeat depended on this one move. Rumble. The brilliant sky rod seemed to have sensed the threat. The blood-colored light pillar on it was affected by the energy and started to sway chaotically. The power that spread out in the sky also started to surge violently. The black-robed man slammed his palm on the brilliant sky rod. Thousand Peak Summit. In an instant, countless blood-colored icicles rapidly condensed and fell crazily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1668. Almost at the same time, the minor sky shuttle formation shone brightly. The two sides clashed fiercely. Soon, The icicles were all swallowed by the silver flowing light. After that, there was a series of crackling sounds. The icicles were all quickly and completely shattered by the power of the minor sky shuttle formation. The black-robed man's body swayed, and he almost fell to the ground. After this attack, the blood-red color in the sky almost completely dissipated. Only the blood-red pillar of light was left, and it was on the verge of collapse. The minor sky shuttle formation continued to approach. Finally, its edge collided with the blood-red pillar of light. The peerlessly formidable forces from both sides devoured each other without the slightest sound. Only the space in the surroundings that was constantly collapsing showed how intense the battle was at this moment. Nan Yuxing and the others were walking forward. Perhaps because they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, the atmosphere was tense. Suddenly, Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks. "Wait!" Hearing this, the few people behind him immediately stopped. Elder Bai Tong saw that his expression was not right, and followed his line of sight. "What's wrong?" It seemed that there was nothing wrong. Elder Wu Peng said in a low voice, "Look at the sky over there. Just a moment ago, it was still shrouded in blood, but now, it has suddenly disappeared. Only layers of dark clouds were left, and it was terrifyingly dark." After his reminder, the others suddenly understood. What does this mean?" Nan Yuxing frowned. Elder Wu Peng paused, and his voice was even lower and colder. "If I'm not wrong, the blood in the sky must be caused by the black-robed man. But now it's suddenly dissipated. It's really strange. Isn't that the end?" Nan Yuxing asked. What was there to worry about? Since they came here, they had already decided to take the risk, hadn't they? Wasn't it a little too late to worry now? Elder Bai Tong suddenly thought of something, and his expression froze. "Do you mean Rong Xiu's successful counterattack caused this situation?" Elder Wu Peng shook his head. "I'm not sure either. He did not see it with his own eyes, so everything was just a guess." "How is that possible?" Nan Yuxing immediately retorted. They had seen the black-robed man's strength. Even if Rong Xiu teamed up, it was impossible for them to win. "Elder Wu Peng, I think you're worrying too much. Was it really that easy to defeat a God Highness?" Elder Wu Peng frowned and nodded. "Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's continue." However, the further they went, the more dangerous it became. "We should be more careful, it's never wrong." After saying that, they continued to walk forward. The battle between the minor sky shuttle formation and the blood-colored pillar of light continued. The surroundings were silent, and the air seemed to have frozen. Everyone's gazes were now focused on that spot. They both understood that this was an all-out attack from both sides. Win or lose, it all depended on this match. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound was heard. A crack suddenly appeared on the small sky shuttle formation. Chu Liuyue's heart sank. It was as if a crack had appeared on the embankment. Even though it was small, it still couldn't be ignored. 1,000 li dike can be destroyed by an ant-hole. The surrounding energy was still surging, battering against the opening again and again. Gradually, that crack began to expand. The power of the entire minor sky shuttle formation was rapidly decreasing. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that in the end, the blood-colored pillar of light still had the upper hand in this battle. At this point, the black-robed man's heart finally calmed down. He clenched his fists and sneered. "Sheng Guanyu, you're indeed powerful. If you were given a few more years, you would be able to fight me head-on. Unfortunately, you're still a little lacking." He was definitely going to win this match. As he spoke, a long crack had already appeared on the minor sky shuttle formation, and the speed of its rotation was gradually slowing down. In the end, it had almost completely stopped. The blood-colored pillar of light was constantly corroding the huge silver Xian formation. As the black fog drifted away, a thick stench spread to the surroundings, making people feel nauseous. Even though most of the power of the blood-colored light beam had been reduced in this battle, it was still the one with the upper hand relatively speaking. Seeing this, Chu Ning couldn't help but step forward, becoming increasingly anxious. If it weren't for Rong Xiu's barrier, he wouldn't have been able to hold himself back and rushed forward. He didn't notice that the bloodstains on his palms were rapidly fading away. Moreover, a warm aura suddenly surged in his dantian, and then quickly spread to his limbs and bones. It was only when the scorching heat reached his hands that he finally realized that something was wrong, and he quickly lowered his head to take a look. What he saw caused his pupils to shrink slightly, because the numerous wounds on his hands had already recovered by more than half. Chu Ning's brows were tightly knitted, but there was no shock in the depths of his eyes. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. It was just that he had been in a daze most of the time, and he had been thinking about you all along, so he didn't take this matter to heart. Who knew that it would start again now? At this moment, a loud explosion suddenly came from the front. Chu Ning immediately raised his head to look. The huge silver Xian formation had completely collapsed. Countless violent energies crazily spread in all directions. The blood-colored pillar of light suddenly slashed down from the sky. Like a blood sword, it slashed directly at Chu Luyue. She suddenly raised her head. Digression, I finally had a good sleep yesterday, and am back. 6 p.m., mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1669. Countless divine realms gathered around her and formed a huge barrier around her. However, the blood-red light beam was extremely sharp and carried a shocking murderous intent. It tore through the air. Even the deity domains trembled violently and then collapsed one after another. The black-robed man sneered. You are indeed capable to be able to get them to help you. However, no matter what, these are only the divine realms of high god powerhouses. It was no different from wishful thinking if she wanted to fight against a high god powerhouse. The blood-red light beam was getting closer and closer. Chu Liyue's hair was swept up by the strong wind, and her clothes flapped wildly. Dumpling called her nervously and instinctively wanted to go forward. Chu Liyue turned around and put her behind her, while she stood in front of her. Dumpling grabbed her sleeve and refused to let go. Yu wanted to stand in front of her? However, the Xian formation just now had almost exhausted all of Yu's strength. At this moment, how could she block this attack? However, it was different for her. She was a crimson blood celestial phoenix. Her physical strength was strong to begin with, and she had inherited the strength of her ancestors. She would have no problem dealing with this. However, before she could say anything, Chu Liyue spoke first. Stay behind me. This was not a question, nor was it a compromise. It was an unquestionable order. Dumpling looked up and wanted to say something. Chu Liyue had already turned around, took a step forward, and picked up the black shield from the ground. She crossed her legs slightly and placed the black shield in front of her. Since the appearance of those stones, everyone present had almost forgotten about the black shield's existence. Seeing Chu Liyue pick it up again, the black-robed man was stunned at first, but then he snorted disdainfully. If it was before, he might have been a little afraid of the black shield. But now, he had already used the third stage of the brilliant sky staff. This was not a threat at all. At the same time, the blood-red light beam had already slammed down. Chu Liyue held the shield high and stood in front of himself and Dumpling. Boom! An incomparably powerful force smashed heavily onto the black shield. Chu Liyue's arm instantly went numb. His body trembled violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even the ground beneath her feet had sunk in deeply, and several cracks had appeared in the surroundings. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power contained in this attack was. However, only a shallow mark was left on the black shield, but it did not crack. As for Chu Liyue, after forcefully swallowing the remaining blood in his chest, he was actually able to hold on. The black-robed man suddenly took a step forward. How could this be? Even if several high gods joined forces, they would not be able to withstand the brilliant sky staff's attack. What happened to Shangguanyu? You seem disappointed that I didn't die? Chu Liyue raised his eyes, and the corner of his mouth that was dripping with blood slowly curved into an arrogant and unbridled smile. His clear eyes were filled with a raging battle intent. Seeing her smile, The black-robed man suddenly felt uneasy. No, he clenched the brilliant sky staff in his hand tightly, but his arms were trembling uncontrollably. You were the one who attacked previously. Now, it should be my turn, right? Chu Luiyue said slowly. As soon as she finished speaking, her eyes shone brightly. The stones that were scattered around her suddenly seemed to have been summoned by something, and they began to roll restlessly. Scarlet Cloud Sword suddenly appeared in her hand, and it shone with a cold light. When the black-robed man saw Scarlet Cloud Sword, he heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was a venerable divine weapon, she could not unleash its full power due to her current cultivation level. It was nothing to be afraid of. However, just as this thought flashed through his mind, he realized that something was wrong. This was because he realized that the deity territory had suddenly begun to rush towards Scarlet Cloud Sword. They transformed into streaks of light and condensed on the bright and sharp Scarlet Heaven Sword. Soon, Scarlet Cloud Sword was covered in a layer of extremely dazzling light. From afar, it was filled with brilliant lights and vibrant colors. At the same time, a shocking pressure surged out from it. Sensing that terrifying aura, the black-robed man subconsciously took half a step back. She actually fused all the battle intent contained in the deity territory into Scarlet Cloud Sword. Although it was not a complete fusion, it had indeed greatly increased Scarlet Cloud Sword's power. One had to know that although these deity territories were not very strong, the battle intent surging within them was left behind from the shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago. It was extremely terrifying. Once it was condensed, it would be extremely terrifying. Sheng Wanyu, how did she think of this? Actually, Chu Luiyue did this purely because she had a sudden inspiration and had a sudden idea. She knew very well that she was definitely not a match for this black-robed man with her own strength. Therefore, she had to rely on external forces. Thus, she thought of these stones. Rong Xiu had once said that these stones contained astonishing battle intent. She thought that perhaps she could borrow their strength to fight. In the end, things went smoother than expected. These stones seemed to be exceptionally obedient. She had only used her mind, and they were extremely cooperative. Therefore, even if it was the first time she tried to use this method, the effect was surprisingly good. Sensing the surging battle intent on Scarlet Cloud Sword, Chu Luiyue felt even more confident. She held the hilt of the sword tightly with one hand. When the last bit of battle intent had completely merged, she finally raised the sword. It fell fiercely. This sword did not have any tricks. It was extremely simple and neat. The sword light flickered, and the blood-colored light pillar was directly cut in half and completely disintegrated. The sword chi did not stop. Instead, it approached at an even more astonishing speed. It went straight for the black-robed man. The black-robed man knew that things were not good. He tapped the tip of his foot and immediately retreated. However, he was fast, but the sword chi was faster. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. Helpless, he could only raise the brilliant sky staff in front of him. Clang, crack. Almost at the same time that the sword chi fell, a crisp cracking sound was suddenly heard. A crack had appeared on the brilliant sky staff. The tyrannical sword chi wrapped around the black-robed man, and his black robe fluttered crazily. He began to frantically mobilize the strength of his body. However, the 3 attacks of the brilliant sky staff had exhausted all his strength. At this moment he could no longer attack. In a hurry, he began to look around as if he was waiting for something. However, there was nothing. He became more and more anxious. It should not be like this. This was the tomb of the honored god. He had already fallen into such a situation. Why was there no movement? His hood was finally torn apart with a loud noise. Sensing this change, his mind suddenly panicked. In a battle between experts, a small mistake was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Therefore, in the next moment, his defense completely collapsed, and his body flew out uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1670. At the same time, The hood on his head was finally torn apart completely, revealing his true appearance. When he fell to the ground, his first reaction was to cover his face with his sleeves. However, everyone present had excellent eyesight. It was obvious that it was useless for him to cover up now. Chu Luiwen narrowed his eyes. It was the face of a man who looked to be in his 30s. His appearance was ordinary and his facial features were ordinary. He was unremarkable in the crowd. However, his eyes, were pure black. At a glance, it was empty and dark. It was indeed strange. Perhaps because he had suffered a series of huge blows, his body had become much more illusory and his aura was weak. The brilliant sky staff had been broken into two. Half of it fell to the ground while the other half was still tightly held in his palm. The cut was smooth and neat. It was obvious how powerful the sword just now was. Of course, that did not mean that Chu Luiwe was stronger than the other party. It could only be said that the battle intent in those stones was too strong. It was so strong that the sword cut him. Chu Luiwe walked forward. The black-robed man trembled instinctively and wanted to retreat. However, he realized that his body seemed to be nailed to the ground and could not move. He was shocked and looked around in panic again. The vast and boundless wilderness was empty, silent, and cold. There were only pieces of broken tombstones that stood in a mess and did not move. There was no response. Just like the previous situation, the tombs had actually severed the connection between him and the tombs, and he had been completely abandoned. How could this be? How could this be? He could not figure it out. It had been fine for the past few years. He could borrow the power here and use it for himself. That was why he dared to say that this was his territory. But now, everything had become a lie. A pair of boots appeared in the corner of his eyes. His body froze and he suddenly stopped all his movements. The air seemed to have frozen. A dazzling sword light cut through the void and stabbed straight at him. Swoosh! The tip of the sword was pointed at his glabella. It was just an inch away. As long as Chu Luiwe wanted to, she could take his life directly. However, she did not make a move immediately. There were too many secrets hidden in this man. It would be a pity if she killed him just like that. What are you looking for? Chu Luiwe tilted his head and asked indifferently. She could clearly see that the man had been looking left and right since just now, as if he was looking for something or waiting for something. The black-robed man glanced at the broken brilliant heaven rod in his hand and suddenly sneered. Then he casually threw away the remaining half. Don't you know what I'm looking for? His words were filled with mockery. Chu Luiwe narrowed his eyes slightly. Before she could say anything, the man had already closed his eyes. If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Since I've lost to you today, then you can kill me or torture me as you wish. He never thought of begging for mercy, because he knew better than anyone that at this time, living was more painful than dying. It could only be said that there was a careless mistake. He had underestimated Shangguanyu. Chu Luiwe found it even more interesting to see him begging for death. His pale lips curled into a cold smile. All these years, you've attacked me many times. Now you want to die? How can there be such a good thing? The black-robed man's heart sank, and he suddenly opened his eyes. What do you want? He knew her quite well. This woman was not easy to deal with. If he really fell into her hands, she would definitely have the means to make him suffer a fate worse than death. Chu Luiwe raised her chin. I don't want anything. I've always been a person who believes in reciprocity. You must have put in a lot of effort to give me those gifts before, so of course I have to return the favor. Let me ask you a few questions. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I'll give you a quick end. How about that? The black-robed man took a deep breath, but his heart was still burning. He sneered. What if you're still not satisfied with my answers? Chu Luiwe shrugged. Then you can only blame yourself for being unlucky. Shameless. The black-robed man had already expected her to do this, so he did not intend to agree to her request from the beginning. He closed his eyes again, as if he had already made up his mind not to give her any answer. Chu Luiwe did not mind. She put down the black shield and took out the black wooden tablet. She weighed it in her hand and asked with interest, This thing is very important to the people of the Black Demon Cave, But since you've already betrayed us, I presume this thing is of no use to you? The black-robed man refused to answer, his attitude firm. Chu Liwei glanced at him, then handed the black wooden tablet to Dumpling. Dumpling, get rid of this eyesore. Okay. Dumpling agreed crisply and took the wooden tablet. Her other hand was not injured, so she exerted force and the wooden tablet was reduced to dust. The black-robed man did not even bat an eyelid. Chu Liwei nodded in understanding. It seems that you really have no connection with the Black Demon Cave, and you found another way to store this soul. If I'm not wrong, it should be this black robe? Hearing this, the man suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw that Chu Liwei seemed to have confirmed something, he came back to his senses and gritted his teeth. You tricked me? Chu Liwei smiled. I was just guessing. Who knew that you would admit it so quickly? Without a physical body, the soul had to find something to store in order to successfully survive for a long time. Just like Taizu back then, several souls were separated and stored in the Dragon Abyss Sword and the Jade Pendant. And this man dared to use this black wooden tablet as bait and put it in her hands, which meant that he did not care about it. The higher the level of a person from the Black Demon Cave, the closer the connection with this wooden tablet. Based on this man's strength, he could not have easily broken free from this layer of restraint. He must have used some method to forcibly break free, otherwise, he wouldn't have had such confidence. Chu Liwei sized him up for a while. The black-robed man turned his gaze away. After that, no matter what Chu Liwei said, he refused to speak. Chu Liwei frowned slightly. At this moment, Rong Xiu suddenly said, Mo Shiqian still doesn't know that you're hiding here, right? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1671. These words finally caused the man to react. He suddenly looked at Rong Xiu, his eyes filled with bewilderment. What do you know? There was a hint of panic and fear in his words. Obviously, he was fearful and in awe of the Mo Shiqian that Rong Xiu mentioned. Seeing his reaction, Chu Liwei asked curiously, Why are you still here? Mo Shiqian, why does this name sound so familiar? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. The leader of the Black Demon Cave. At the same time, he was also his former master. Chu Liwei suddenly understood. No wonder. She had indeed heard of this name before. It was just that a few years had passed, and she had lost a lot of memories in the middle, so she did not immediately recall it. Only when Rong Xiu said this did she recall. The black-robed man's expression turned even uglier. He stared at Rong Xiu with a deadly gaze, afraid that the latter would say something shocking. However, Rong Xiu did not continue to pay attention to him after asking this question. Instead, he walked in front of Chu Liwei and held her hand. A gentle force quickly entered her body, tidying up the wild force around her bit by bit, and at the same time healing her injuries. Don't force yourself. Rong Xiu's voice was low and gentle. Chu Liwei immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Previously, she had indeed been barely holding on. After going through such a fierce battle, her strength had been completely exhausted. Even with the help of external forces, her body was still suffering from considerable pain and torment. It was just that she had been tense and did not dare to reveal anything. It was only now that she heard Rong Xiu's whisper and felt the endless power and heat in his palm that she finally relaxed a little. Did you have a good fight? Rong Xiu looked down at her and asked. Chu Liwei raised her head slightly and met his eyes. There were many things that did not need to be said. A look was enough. The corners of her mouth slowly raised into a smile, and she nodded with curved eyes. Yes. Everything that he had suffered before was finally paid back. She had been holding it in for several years, and now she was finally able to release it. Awesome. Seeing her happy, Rong Xiu's thin lips also slightly raised a curve. That's good. You can leave the rest to me, right? Chu Liwei blushed slightly, but a warm current gushed out from the bottom of her heart. Even her limbs and bones warmed up. Others might find it strange that Rong Xiu did not make a move from the beginning to the end. Only she knew that Rong Xiu had done this on purpose. She had been pestered by this man for many years, and now she could finally settle all their grudges. In the end, it was best for him to take revenge with his own hands. Rong Xiu had been watching everything from the side. He must have been having a hard time waiting, right? Chu Luiwei gently nodded, then couldn't help but ask, "That's right. Leave his life to me." Rong Xiu held his forehead helplessly, and the smile on his lips deepened. "I know. Other than when the two of them first met, when he helped her kill someone and made her unhappy, he had never made the same mistake again. This was also the reason why he didn't do it even though he had several opportunities to kill people." Chu Ning also came over at this time. Are you all right?" Even though the outcome was already decided, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of what happened just now. At this moment, seeing her pale face, his heart was still throbbing with pain. Rong Xiu let go of Chu Liyue's hand. "You go accompany Lord Chu Ning. I'll interrogate him." It wasn't easy for father and daughter to reunite, so they needed more time to spend together. Chu Liyue glanced at Rong Xiu. This man could always guess what she was thinking, and could always take care of all her feelings. She nodded and turned to look at Chu Ning. "Father." This call made Chu Ning's nose ache. He looked at Chu Liyue carefully. She was right in front of him. He clearly had a lot to say, but after seeing the face that he had been thinking about day and night, he suddenly couldn't say those words. After a while, Chu Ning said, Good. Has grown up." This face was still the familiar face in his memory, but it had changed a lot. The youthful aura between her eyebrows had quietly dissipated. It was replaced by a subduing heroic spirit. Furthermore, there was an indescribable aura of nobility around her. That was a temperament that came from her bones. Just by standing there, she made people unconsciously submit to her. Chu Ning looked at her without blinking. She was obviously very familiar, but she was obviously different from the person in his memory. Looking at him emotional but not daring to step forward, Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly turned red. "Father, he has made you suffer." Looking at the dense tears in her eyes, all the messy thoughts in Chu Ning's heart flew away in an instant, leaving only heartache. He hurriedly reached out to wipe her tears. No, our you is the best. Don't cry, you don't cry. Father's heart aches." Chu Liyue rarely cried. Although her eyes were red, she had been holding it in. But when she heard this, she suddenly couldn't help but cry. But she quickly held back the remaining tears. It was already a blessing in life to be able to see each other again. She couldn't be happier, let alone other things. With this, the final invisible barrier between the father and daughter was shattered. Tuanzi grabbed Chu Liyue's clothes with one hand and looked up at her. Then, it looked at Chu Liyue and Chu Ning before breaking into a smile. On the other side, Rong Xiu stood in front of the black-robed man. The black-robed man became more and more nervous. Rong Xiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and said with a faint smile, "If he knows that you are snatching something from him, guess how he will react? Digression? I really don't have any more." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1672. The black-robed man clenched his fists unconsciously. Even though he had left the Black Demon Cave for several years, every time he heard that person's name, his heart would still tremble. It was still the same today. He opened his mouth, wanting to defend himself, but he didn't know what to say. Rong Xiu's gaze was like a sharp blade, piercing straight into his heart. It was as if all lies were jokes in front of him. How do you know all this?" Not many people knew that Emo Shiqian was also looking for that water droplet. In fact, in comparison, he was the one who was more high-profile. However, Emo Shiqian had always been cautious, especially in the past few years. This time, he deliberately led Shangguan Yu here to avoid the eyes of the Black Demon Cave. However, I did not expect Rong Xiu to actually. He already came to find me. How do you think I know? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. If not for the fact that he can't leave the Black Demon Cave now, do you think you can live safely until today? The black-robed man gritted his teeth. The silence was almost suffocating. Hearing this, Chu Luwe blinked in surprise. "Mo Shiqian went to look for you?" Rong Xiu looked back, a faint smile on his lips. "To be precise, you've seen him before. The one who appeared in the northern region of the primordial world was his illusion." Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. So that person was Mo Shiqian. She knew that other than the black-robed man, there had always been people who wanted to attack her, but she didn't think of this. Although she had met the other party before, the other party had never shown his true appearance, so she didn't know much about the other party. Unexpectedly, Rong Xiu glanced at the black-robed man and said indifferently, "A few years ago, Mo Shiqian had a capable subordinate, Shan Qin. This person was talented and deeply trusted by Mo Shiqian. In just a few years, he grew from a nobody to Mo Shiqian's right-hand man. Rumor has it that Mo Shiqian once planned to leave the position of the head of the 8 hall masters to him. Unfortunately, before the celebration, this person inexplicably disappeared and there has been no news since then. Furthermore, all information related to this person in the Black Demon Cave was sealed and wiped out overnight. It's as if this person never existed. Many people thought that he was dead. But who would have thought that the once all-powerful figure in the Black Demon Cave was actually hiding in the god-slaying mound for several years? Rong Xiu spoke slowly, but every word he said was like a steel knife, fiercely scraping the man in the black robe. His expression changed from shock, suspicion, and disbelief to deep despair and fear. Originally, he wanted to deny it, but Rong Xiu had said it so clearly. With just a few words, he had completely exposed him. What else was there to refute? When Chu Luwe heard this, he also understood something. He looked at the black-robed man and frowned. "You betrayed the Black Demon Cave in order to steal my things?" The black-robed man suddenly sneered. "Don't you already know? Why are you asking me again?" His attitude was arrogant and perverse. Obviously, he did not intend to cooperate. Rong Xiu was not in a hurry. He said calmly, "If you speak properly, I'll give you a quick death. If you continue to be like this, I think Mo Shiqian will be happy to receive this gift." These words finally made the black-robed man waver. He would rather die in the hands of these two people than go back to face Mo Shiqian. What he had done all these years was definitely enough for him to suffer a fate worse than death countless times. After a long silence, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "Do you mean what you say? If I say it and you go back on your word in the end, what will happen?" Rong Xiu chuckled. "Is it your turn to bargain now?" The black-robed man immediately fell silent. No matter what he chose, it was a dead end. The only difference was whether the pain before death was more or less. After a while, he finally said, "I'll say it. Actually, the Black Demon Cave has been searching for that thing since many years ago. A few years ago, by chance, the Lord, Mo Shiqian, received news that that thing might be born, so he personally led a few people to go. I was one of them. At that time, although we knew what he was looking for, we didn't know the details. We only knew that it was very important to him. Later, we finally found traces of that thing. We searched for it for a long time without sleep or rest. We experienced countless difficulties and dangers in the process. In the end, when we finally saw that thing, only he and I were still alive. I thought that things would end once we found it. But it turned out that I was just overthinking." The black-robed man suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. "That thing has intelligence and refused to give in. It fought with us. It was also because of that battle that my body was damaged and he was seriously injured. As a result, he can't leave the Black Demon Cave until today." Chu Luwe frowned. She really didn't know about these things. She remembered that when she obtained this water droplet, it was actually an extremely coincidental situation. Moreover, at that time, she didn't even see what it was before it forcefully entered her body. Intelligence. It did have intelligence, but it didn't seem to resist or fight. Why did he say, "It was so difficult and dangerous"? There was a trace of hatred in the black-robed man's voice. At that time, in order to snatch that thing, he wanted to refine my soul and use it as a primer to subdue it. Unfortunately, I noticed it and tried my best to escape. Later, I accidentally broke into the god-slaying tomb and obtained an opportunity here. I stayed here and severed all ties with the Black Demon Cave. So Mo Shiqian had once wanted to kill him. No wonder. Your connection with the Black Wooden Token was also cut off at that time, right? Chu Liwei asked. The black-robed man closed his eyes. That's right. He wanted to refine my soul, so he removed the restriction, which gave me a chance to escape. Because of this, the people of the Black Demon Cave have never found any trace of me all these years. She didn't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate. From then on, I knew that that thing was the most precious treasure in the world. If I wanted to take revenge, I had to snatch it. Unfortunately, whether it was him or me, we were one step behind you. The black-robed man stared at Chu Liwei and suddenly sneered. Actually, to be precise, that thing chose you. No matter how hard others tried, it was still useless. He didn't believe it before, but now he had to believe it. They had gone through several life-and-death situations and still couldn't get what they wanted, but she easily took it. Sometimes, the gap between people was just that big. After knowing that that thing followed you, we all had our eyes on you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1673. It's just that all these years, I've been acting in secret and never let him find any clues. Unfortunately, he was very cautious in doing this, because he knew too well what kind of methods Mo Shiqian would use to deal with him once he knew that he was still alive and wanted to snatch this thing from him. Every time he made a move, he would choose the right time and make all the preparations before taking action. Until this time, when the time was right, he finally used Chu Ning to lure her over. He thought that it was foolproof and was determined to win. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. In the end, he still suffered a crushing defeat. At this point, I've said everything I need to say. As the black-robed man spoke, he closed his eyes as if he could kill or cut him up at will. The surroundings were silent. Only the wind on the wasteland blew past their ears, bringing with it a hint of coldness. Chu Liwei stared at him for a while before finally digesting what he had said. After a moment, she took a step forward. The black-robed man thought that she was going to make a move and felt relieved. However, unexpectedly, Chu Liwei was not going to kill him. I have 2 more questions. If you answer truthfully, I'll send you on your way personally. The black-robed man opened his eyes and frowned. He had already said everything clearly. What else did she want to ask? However, seeing that Chu Liue's expression did not seem to be fake, he asked patiently. What? First, back then, when you were determined to take revenge, you decided to compete with him for this thing. That means you know what it is? Second, when you were fighting with me just now, what were you waiting for? Chu Liwei asked these 2 questions calmly. However, the black-robed man's expression changed instantly. He subconsciously looked away and frowned. After a while, he said, "If you don't know what it is, how can others know? Besides, just now, you were wrong. I wasn't waiting for anything." Chu Liwei smiled. "It seems that you want to go back to the Black Demon Cave to take a look." You? The black-robed man was furious. Unfortunately, he was at the mercy of others. No matter how aggrieved he was, there was nothing he could do. Both sides were in a stalemate. After a long while, he finally opened his mouth with difficulty. That is, whoosh. A ripping sound could be heard. The black robe on his body seemed to have been ruthlessly torn apart by an invisible blade. Rong Xiu's eyes darkened, and he immediately attacked. But it was too late. The black robe shattered at an even faster speed, turning into powder. As for the man's soul, it completely dissipated. In just a few breaths of time, the black-robed man had vanished into thin air. Not a single trace was left behind. Chu Liwei frowned. That black robe is the reason why he was able to survive for so long. Perhaps due to some reason, the black robe was destroyed on its own, and he was killed along with it. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a fierce look. What a pity. Chu Liwei shook his head. Anyway, we've already asked all the questions we need to ask. As for the last two questions, I just want to confirm his attitude. In the end, he was just a puppet. Rong Xiu looked at her. Chu Liuyue's lips curved up slightly. She then looked at her surroundings and said meaningfully, "This god-slaying mound, it really hides countless secrets, doesn't it?" At first, she wasn't sure. But the black-robed man's reaction just now confirmed her guess. But after coming here, she didn't feel threatened. Especially after these stones stuck to her, she seemed to feel more at ease walking in the god-slaying mound. Moreover, she had finally solved a problem that had been bothering her for years. This trip was worth it. "Let's go find Taizu first, then we'll leave this place after we meet up," Chu Liue said. Rong Xiu nodded and was about to speak, but suddenly his expression changed slightly, and he turned his head. Chu Liue followed his gaze and saw a few familiar figures. Her lips curled slightly, but there was no smile in her eyes. They really are haunting. Almost at the same time when Rong Xiu and Chu Liue looked over, Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks. Behind him, Nan Yuxing and the others also came to a stop. At this point, they could finally see the scene in front of them. But everything in front of them shocked them to the core. How are they still alive? Nan Yuxing was shocked and muttered in disbelief, almost suspecting that he had seen wrongly. He rubbed his eyes and looked carefully, but found that the two people were still in his line of sight. Oh no, it was 4 people. In addition to Rong Xiu and Nan Yuxing, the little girl from before also appeared. Next to her, there was a middle-aged man covered in blood and in a sorry state. From the way they interacted with each other, it seemed that they were very close to them. But in addition to these 4 people, the black-robed man from before was nowhere to be seen. Elder Wu Peng's eyes quickly swept across the scene in front of him, and his heart slowly sank. The ground was a mess, and it was clear that the battle here was intense. But Rong Xiu and the others were still standing here, and the black-robed man was nowhere to be seen. "Looks like the black-robed man lost," Elder Wu Peng lowered his voice. "How is that possible?" Nan Yuxing instinctively retorted. "He's so strong. Even if Rong Xiu and the others worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him." That was true. Even Elder Wu Peng himself felt that this conjecture was too absurd. But other than this answer, was there any other explanation? Then, could it be that the black-robed man suddenly showed mercy and let them go? Nan Yuxing choked. The others stopped talking. They had seen the black-robed man's attitude clearly. He would never reconcile with Rong Xiu and the others. But now, I felt that something was wrong just now. Elder Wu Peng clenched his fists. On the way here, they saw from afar that the blood-red color in the sky faded quickly, and the blood-red beam of light fell straight down, causing quite a commotion. At that time, he thought that he was overthinking, but who knew? Elder Bai Tong couldn't help but say, "I think Rong Xiu and the others are a bit strange. Why don't we leave first and then, what a coincidence, we meet again." Before Elder Bai Tong could finish his sentence, Chu Liue smiled and greeted the few of them. "I remember that you all left before, saying that you were going to look for something, right? But why did you turn back halfway? Could it be that you want to come back and see how the battle is going?" With that, Chu Liue spread out his hands helplessly. "What a pity, I seem to have disappointed you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 1674. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the guesses of Elder Wu Peng and the others. They looked at each other with sullen expressions. Although they came back for other important matters, they weren't in a good mood when they saw Rong Xiu and the others standing here safe and sound. Apart from shock, they were more puzzled. That black-robed man was a venerable god. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with them? What exactly happened in the middle to make the outcome turn out like this? They couldn't figure it out. They really couldn't figure it out. Nan Yi was annoyed at the sight of Chu Liue, and when she heard this, she was even angrier. However, before he could say anything, he was stopped by Elder Wu Peng. "You've misunderstood. We're not interested in your matters. We came back here because we have something else to deal with." Chu Liue blinked and looked around. "Oh, could it be that the thing you're looking for is here?" As soon as she finished speaking, the expressions of the people opposite her changed again. This surprised Chu Luiyue. She was just teasing and said it casually. Who knew that? It seemed to be true. This time, she really couldn't help but laugh. It seems that I was right? Our matters have nothing to do with you. The black-robed man's inexplicable disappearance made Elder Wu Peng secretly wary of Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. No one knew what other trump cards they had. At this time, it was best not to provoke them. Because of this, he spoke more politely than before. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Originally, she was really not interested in their matters. However, when she saw how nervous they were, she felt a little curious. These people had a strong background and had high standards. Something that they cared so much about should be an incredible treasure, right? But curiosity was one thing. She wasn't in the mood to care about their matters now. Finding Taizu was the most important thing now. Therefore, Chu Luiyue didn't bother too much with them. Her lips curved slightly. It's best if we don't interfere with each other's business. We're not interested in your business, so I hope you'll take care of yourselves. After saying that, they really turned around, intending to leave. Elder Wu Peng and the others didn't believe it at first, but seeing that they were really going to leave like this, they were a little bewildered. Rong Xiu and the others? Did they really not know anything? Nan Yuxing secretly clenched his fists. Looking at their backs, a thick killing intent flashed across his eyes. Unfortunately, they were all injured, and Rong Xiu's strength was unfathomable. Otherwise, I should really let them stay here forever. He wouldn't let this matter go so easily. Once he left the god-slaying mound, he would definitely. Right. Rong Xiu paused and suddenly turned around to look at him. His deep and clear eyes landed directly on Nan Yuxing. Nan Yuxing's thoughts were instantly interrupted as he felt a chill enveloping his entire body. He couldn't help but shiver. What else do you want? He said fiercely. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. Remember to greet Nan Yifan on behalf of I. After saying that, he turned around and continued to walk forward. Elder Wu Peng and the others were stunned and fell into a long silence. It wasn't until Rong Xiu and the others' figures gradually disappeared that Elder Bai Tong spoke in a low voice, breaking the silence. Could it be that Rong Xiu really knows the master? That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that Rong Xiu's tone was too casual when he mentioned the master. It was as if he really didn't care about the master. It didn't look like he was faking it. At a time like this, what was the point of putting on an act? He was really fearless. He dared to face the master directly. Nan Yuxing wanted to deny it, but he wasn't really a brainless person. He just had to think about it to know that Rong Xiu dared to do this for a reason. But why hadn't he heard father mention it before? Forget it. We'll talk about these things when we get back. Let's find the thing first and leave this place. Nan Yuxing said in frustration, but Rong Xiu's words before he left kept echoing in his ears, making him feel a little uneasy. After walking for some distance, Chu Ning looked back and asked, "What's the matter?" Who are they? It seemed that they were very hostile to you and Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue smiled. They're just some insignificant people. You don't have to care. Chu Ning saw that she looked relaxed, as if she really didn't care about those people. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He patted Chu Luiyue's hand gently. That's good. His palm was very wide and thick, with calluses on it. It was a little rough, but it was exceptionally warm. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue was stunned and looked down. Father! Chu Ning didn't understand. Chu Luiyue grabbed his hand and looked at it for a while before asking curiously. Didn't you have a few wounds on your hand before? Why are they all gone now? She remembered clearly that those wounds were old and new, and 2 of them were especially serious. Even if he took medicine and recuperated well, according to her father's body, he would need a month to recover. But it had only been a while. Why were those wounds all gone? When Chu Ning heard that she was asking about this, he looked hesitant. In fact, he also knew that had always been very meticulous. This matter couldn't be hidden from her for too long. It was just that he really didn't know how to say it. Father? Chu Luiyue saw his reaction and felt even more surprised. At the same time, she was a little worried. This matter was really abnormal. Could it be that father's body? Chu Ning saw that she was worried and hurriedly said, Don't worry. Actually, this situation has happened several times. I'm already used to it, several times. Hearing this, Chu Luiwei was even more shocked. Yes. That is, every time after I get injured, those wounds will recover on their own after a while. Also, I don't know what's going on. Chu Luiwei carefully looked him up and down and was surprised to find that not only his hand, but the other wounds on his body also seemed to have recovered. This was, Rong Xiu suddenly said, Lord Chu Ning, can you let me take your pulse? Digression. 6 p.m. tomorrow, we will resume at 12 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1675. Chu Ning and Chu Luiwei glanced at each other. Chu Luiwei released his hand and asked, Do you know what's going on? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. I'm not sure yet. As he spoke, Chu Ning had already extended his hand. Rong Xiu's well-defined fingers rested on his wrist. The surroundings were silent. Rong Xiu separated a portion of his force and injected it into Chu Ning's body. This force was like a stone thrown into a deep well, quickly disappearing in Chu Ning's body. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly as he looked up at Chu Ning. Lord Chu Ning, your current martial artist rank is? Chu Ning's expression dimmed. Some time ago, I was seriously injured and my pill of origin was almost destroyed. My martial artist rank also fell back to rank 1. Now, I'm no different from a useless person. Ever since he was brought away from the empire of Yao Qin, he had seen countless powerhouses. From then on, he knew that his little bit of strength was actually not enough in the outside world. Under such circumstances, he was unexpectedly seriously injured and became a rank 1 martial artist. He felt very embarrassed when he said it. You had grown so well now, but Chu Luiwei frowned. Fell back to rank 1. Daddy must have encountered an extremely dangerous situation before. Could it be that something happened that caused his body to become like this? To be able to recover so quickly, it seems that he's not an ordinary rank 1 martial artist. Rong Xiu released his hand and paused for a moment before asking again, Can you display a god territory now? Chu Luiwei was shocked and his eyes widened slightly. Why did Rong Xiu suddenly ask this? Daddy has already fallen back to rank 1 martial artist, how can he have a god territory? However, Chu Ning did not immediately deny it. Instead, he frowned slightly and asked with some uncertainty. Like, the ones that you summoned before? Rong Xiu nodded, yes. After a moment of silence, Chu Ning actually nodded. There have been 2. But at that time, I didn't know what it was, and it soon disappeared again. As he spoke, he hesitantly raised his hand. A streak of azure light slowly flew out. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly jumped. This was actually a divine domain. Even though she had seen many storms and waves, when she saw this scene at this time, she was still shocked on the spot and was unable to recover for a long time. Just a second ago, she was still immersed in the sad atmosphere of her father falling back to a rank 1 warrior, and in the blink of an eye, she saw him summoning a divine territory who would be able to endure such a drop in status. Chu Luiwei forcefully closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the divine domain was still lingering around Chu Ning and had not disappeared. Her throat tightened as she struggled to speak. Father, your divine domain? Chu Luiwei's voice was floating when she said these few words. Chu Ning nodded. Previously, I didn't know what this was. It was only when I saw you fight with that person today that I found out that this was the divine region. Chu Ning really didn't know anything about this. When his strength reached its peak in the past, he was only a rank 5 warrior in the empire of Yao Qin. And this strength was definitely considered top-notch in the entire empire of Yao Qin. However, a divine domain could only be obtained after breaking through a rank 9 warrior and successfully becoming a god-rank powerhouse. How did he have the chance to know this? At most, he had only seen this term a few times in some biographies. However, To him, those were things that were extremely far away. He would never have thought that one day he would actually possess a divine domain, especially since his current strength was only at the first stage of the warrior realm. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he would never have thought of himself. Looking at Chu Ning's blank face, Chu Luiwei was speechless. She suddenly felt that she was really not enough in front of her father. What was the big deal about being able to fight above his level? What was the big deal about being able to contract with a divine beast? Her father had become a rank 1 warrior and had a divine domain. What kind of operation was this? Chu Luiwei really didn't understand. In the past, it was only others who called her a pervert. Now, she felt that compared to her father, she was really inferior. Sensing the strange gazes of the few people, Chu Ning felt a little awkward. I don't know what's going on either. It's just that after I was injured that time, when I woke up again, it became like this. At that time, he was still sad for a long time because of the fall in his strength and didn't think about what this thing was at all. As expected, Rong Xiu's face revealed a look of relief as his thin lips curled up slightly. I still have to congratulate Lord Chu Ning for obtaining such an opportunity. Opportunity? Chu Luiwei and Chu Ning asked in unison. Rong Xiu nodded. If I'm not wrong, Lord Chu Ning should have obtained the indestructible divine body by chance. Chu Luiwei was shocked. Indestructible divine body. She had heard of this before. A few years ago at Lingxiao College, after she broke through to the divine level, she had been thinking about condensing a divine body. However, this matter was very complicated. Many divine level powerhouses, even after crossing the threshold of the divine level, could not condense their own divine body in their lifetime. At that time, she didn't know what kind of divine body was most suitable for her, so she searched through Lingxiao College's library. She remembered that in an ancient scroll, there was a record of this divine body. The so-called indestructible divine body was an extremely special divine body. For ordinary cultivators, their original body and divine body were separated. However, cultivators with the indestructible divine body could directly change their own body into a divine body. In other words, such cultivators would only have one body from the beginning to the end. Compared to other cultivators who could separate divine bodies, this was indeed a disadvantage. However, the indestructible divine body had an incomparable advantage. This divine body had extremely tenacious vitality. As long as there was still a breath left, it could quickly recover. Chu Luiwei looked at Chu Ning. Previously, he had so many terrible wounds on his body, and they were serious. However, in this short period of time, those wounds had completely healed, and even a scar was hard to see. This was the indestructible divine body? But father is only a stage 1 warrior now, how could... Rong Xiu smiled and explained. Lord Chu Ning did not break through on his own, but he accidentally obtained some kind of opportunity and obtained the indestructible divine body. His original strength was not compatible with this. So I think that when he obtained the indestructible divine body, he automatically lowered his strength to that of a stage 1 warrior to make it easier for him to cultivate again. Also, Lord Chu Ning's Yuan Meridian level has been changed to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Rong Xiu raised his chin as he spoke. You can check his pulse yourself. Chu Luiwei actually believed his words, but she still could not help but go forward and check Chu Ning's pulse. After a moment, she released her hand with a shocked expression. When she looked at Chu Ning again, her gaze was very different from before. It really is the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.